Right, everybody, welcome to the Brody Schofield Show. This is actually the biggest episode so far of the Brody Schofield Show, which doesn't take much, but it's even bigger now that we have guest Jen Stevens on. She's a New York Times best-selling author of Fast, Feast, Repeat, and Delay, Don't Deny. Jen, thank you so much for coming on.
Well, I'm so glad to be here, and I love you being here at the beginning of your podcast. And
Yeah,
I've been podcasting since 2017, which is a long time. Now
so
that I look
awesome.
back, but it's wonderful to be able to create content and put it out in the world and
Yeah,
share stories with people. That's the root of podcasting, is just sharing
right.
stories.
It's awesome. So Jen, I like podcasts when they introduce people, but I like them more when we kind of hear the origin story from the superhero on the screen as well. So kind of give us your origin story, how this all started and how you got to be in the position that you're in.
Well, it's a very interesting story because, I started my career as an elementary school teacher. I taught elementary school for 28 years. And throughout all that time, I struggled with weight. I gained weight, I lost weight, I yo-yoed over the years. So, I was constantly dieting from the time that I, did my first diet officially. I think was right after my freshman year of college, after I gained the freshman 15 or whatever. I came home, dieted, counted calories that summer. It was the summer of 1987. So it's been a long time, long road. But over the years, my weight, it got harder and harder to lose the weight until finally in 2014, I came back from a family cruise. We've been there for spring break, 7 days on a cruise ship. And it was the photos from that cruise that made me realize I didn't even recognize myself. So I came home, got on the scale, and I weighed 210 pounds, which was obese for me. And I really had to come to terms with, okay, I am not just overweight, I am obese, and it's time to do something about it. And at that time, I had a doctorate in gifted education. I was successful in, every area of my life, except why couldn't I lose the weight and keep it off? I was so tired of yo-yoing. So, that is why I started doing intermittent fasting. And I had been dabbling in it because as soon as I first heard about it in around 2009, I just knew it was going to be the answer, but I couldn't make it stick. So I would try it a little bit and then I would quit. Now I understand why it never stuck. I never gave my body time to adapt. But at that time in 2014, I was tired of just starting and stopping. So I'm like, this is the last time I'm ever going to start this. I'm going to start it and I'm just not going to quit. And that's what I did. So I ended up losing 80 pounds with intermittent fasting. I got to my goal. My original goal was to lose 75 pounds. I got there in 2015, went on to lose about 5 more pounds. And I have been maintaining the loss since 2015, which is a long time in the weight maintaining world, right? They say it's really hard to lose more than 10% of your initial starting weight, but it's practically impossible to keep it off. But I've done both of those things. And it's
Wow.
thanks to intermittent fasting as a lifestyle. And so, I've gone through menopause. I'm 53 years old now on the other side of it. And I will never not be an intermittent faster. So I started off, I had my I was doing it, I was living the lifestyle, and I was on Facebook, and so I was in groups. You know how we join a bunch of groups for whatever we're interested in at the moment,
Yeah.
and at that time, it was, fasting, and I was joining fasting groups. This was 2015, and, there was a lot of arguing on Facebook. You may be familiar with that. So I
Yeah.
started my own little group just for me and for my friends who were, wanting to know more about what I was doing. And, the rest, as they say, is history, because it was through starting my very first little tiny Facebook group for me and my friends to support us through intermittent fasting. I ended up with, my first book that I self-published at the end of 2016. That was called Delay, Don't Deny. And, that led me to podcasting and growing my Facebook groups to over, well, we were almost at 500,000 when I left Facebook in 2021. It was huge. And so here we are.
That is so incredible. That's so crazy. So, because like now, I've done a ton of research on this and on intermittent fasting, and it's something that I've always wanted to try.
Right.
But so, did you kind of get into it before the wave? Because right, like
Oh, yeah.
now everything is like, oh, you have this, you need to intermittent fast. Oh, you
Yes.
have this, you need to do this.
I was
So
a
you
very
kind of got
early
into,
adopter. Yeah. I first
yeah,
started dabbling with it, like I said, in 2009. And there were very few resources out there. And every single person who was talking about intermittent fasting from 2009 really until probably 2016. So from 2009 till 2016, everyone only talked about it as a way to eat fewer calories. They just
yeah,
thought, well, we're eating fewer calories. Of course, we're going to lose weight. But it was when Dr. Jason Fung released the obesity code in 2016
mm,
that that I finally understood it was a lot more than just because you're eating fewer calories. It has to do with your levels of insulin and how your body burns fat. And turns out eating all the time is not a great way to tap into fat to burn when you're eating all the time, because insulin is high, and high insulin keeps you from burning fat. So once we started to understand that, it really changed everything. But yes, I was definitely an early adopter. My first Facebook group that I started in 2015 was around the concept of eating one meal a day. Within an eating window, I had a 5-hour eating window, but I centered it around dinner. So I mean, I didn't just like eat one plate of food in like 30 minutes. I ate within a 5-hour window that included, like, thinking about it like a multi-course meal at a restaurant where you have like appetizer, maybe a salad course, your main dish, that sort of thing. But we had that first one meal a day Facebook group that I started in 2015, and it was the only one on Facebook for years. And now it's funny to look back on that, because the idea of one meal a day has kind of taken on a life of its own, and people like strictly define it as 23-1 or eating
right,
one plate of
right.
food. And that, it's just funny to look back on the origins of it, because we were the largest and first group of people calling ourselves as eating one meal a day, but
That's
it's certainly changed into more than that now.
that's so crazy to me. So let me ask. So when you got onto it, did you were you working out a lot too? Was there a lot of physical activity or no?
No. I am
No.
not someone who enjoys exercise and working out for the sake of, like, I'm going to burn the calories. No, I've never
Gotcha.
been one to do that. And it's really interesting. What we've learned about DNA and about your genetics. Some of us have a genetic profile where we are more likely to need exercise to lose weight, and some of us have a genetic profile where we exercise is less likely to lead to weight loss. And so I've had my DNA analyzed and run through all the different analysis third party sites. And one thing about me, which was no surprise, is that my genetic profile is one that is exercise is not likely to lead to weight loss. Now, does that mean I'm saying exercise is not a good thing? No, we all need to exercise. It's
Right.
healthy, it's stress relief, it's good for longevity. But for me, exercise has never once led to more weight loss. And which is
Wow.
interesting, that genetic analysis just kind of proved what I already knew. But if someone's listening and they think, well, I have to work out to lose weight, they're probably of that genetic type where their body does need more exercise to lose weight.
Right.
So I'm one of the people that, I don't know if I'm fortunate or unfortunate to be the kind that does not need, or that exercise is not going to lead to weight loss. But I move my body, I'm active because it
Right.
feels good and it's good for me. I can't sit still.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's awesome. I mean, there's a lot of people out there who I think would want to make a change, and just the fact of getting started on this could really help them, right? So
Yeah,
what's the I guess I've always wanted to try it.
right.
So I've always wanted to try it. So you hear something, so like you'll do the WebMD search, and that's always a dangerous game to play sometimes, because you're getting all these opinions from, maybe people who haven't done it or they have.
Right.
But what have you noticed from people at like younger ages doing? Are we seeing something change in metabolism? Are we seeing if it's beneficial for them as well? Like, is intermittent fasting good for everybody? You know
That's
what
a
I'm trying
great
to say?
question. And we don't want people to do intermittent fasting or live a fasting lifestyle until they are physically developed. So it's not for teens who are still physically maturing, or children or anything like that. It's also not for pregnant or breastfeeding women. But if you have an adult body and you've been through puberty and you're matured, then intermittent fasting is something that you can begin to implement in your life. I like to call it the health plan with the side effect of weight loss, because so many people, myself included, we come to intermittent fasting because we're interested in losing weight. But if you think of intermittent fasting as only a weight loss approach, then you're missing out on so much of it. As I mentioned before, when I read the obesity code in 2016, I realized our bodies are a lot more complicated than just, eat less, move more, calories in, calories out. And it has to do with, like I said, insulin. And our bodies are designed, we put out insulin when we eat, and insulin's role is to lower blood sugar. We probably have all heard of insulin through, the lens of diabetes. You may know someone who's a type 1 diabetic and they need to take insulin. But we all have insulin circulating. We need it, and we need to have it, coming out after we eat. But what we don't want is to have chronic high levels of insulin all the time. It's called hyperinsulinemia. And there's a great book out there if anyone's interested in learning more. It's called Why We Get Sick, Dr. Benjamin Bickman. And the whole book is about, having chronic high levels of insulin. And he connects it, he's a researcher, he connects it to so many of the diseases, whether we're talking about metabolic syndrome, diabetes, cardiovascular problems, even having trouble as you're going through menopause, hormonal problems, thyroid. Having chronic high levels of insulin is related to so many of our health problems right now. So at your age, you don't look like you have any weight that you need to lose. You want
Right.
to maintain good metabolic health through your life. So the way you
Right.
can do that is keep from having insulin released constantly throughout your day. And you may be someone who like a 12-12 is perfectly fine to keep you healthy, meaning you stop eating for a period of 12 hours, and then when you wake up at some point in the morning, you have your first meal of the day, and everything you eat is within that 12-hour period. That would also include, not snacking all the time. Turns out that advice to eat 6 small meals a day is really bad advice. We should not be snacking and grazing constantly. If you look at all the animals who are constant grazers and snackers, they're like the largest animals out there, the ones who are
Right.
constantly grazing. And then you look at the lean, strong animals like, the lion, he has a kill once a day and he eats,
Right.
anyway, we do not want to keep our insulin up all the time. And, you may think that would only be food and snacking, but if you're drinking diet sodas all day long or constantly
Right.
nursing a latte or you're chewing gum nonstop, all of those, food flavors, sweetness causes a
Right.
cephalic phase insulin response. Our body releases insulin. So if from the minute you wake up till the time you go to bed, you're drinking water with a 0-calorie flavor enhancer in there, for example, you're not doing yourself any favors there. So we need to have a period of the time when our insulin is low. And the way to do that is not be putting things in our mouth other than plain
Right.
water, plain sparkling
Right.
water, black coffee, those sorts of things.
Wow. That's that's so great. So I guess the next question that I would have kinda just because I'm kind of being selfish and thinking about myself in a
Well,
way.
that's all right.
So what is the how can you gain muscle through fasting? Do we know that yet? Like, that's a
Well,
common
yeah, we
question I
do
always
know.
hear.
Yes. And I've actually talked to, all sorts of people on my podcast, Intermittent Fasting Stories, including personal trainers and athletes. And um, I'm sure you're familiar with Herschel Walker. He played
Yeah.
football for University of Georgia, and he did some sort of martial arts at some point. He's a guy who you would look at, and I mean, he's got
Yeah.
great muscles. Well, he has eaten one meal a day since he was a teenager. He has
Wow.
built all of those muscles. I mean, he doesn't call himself an intermittent faster. I mean, he might now, but there's a video that he did years ago on you. It's still on YouTube. If you just search for Herschel Walker, one meal a day, there's a video on YouTube where he describes how he eats and how he's eaten since he's a teenager. And again, he's not considering himself an intermittent faster in that video that I've seen. Maybe he does now. But when we are fasting, it turns out levels of human growth hormone are upregulated during fasting. And what helps us to build muscle? Human growth hormone. And so having that occur naturally is amazing. You're not
Wow.
having to take any kind of crazy supplements. You're just letting your body do what it does.
Right. It's so funny because I've read that a lot and I've heard that a lot from people saying that you can build muscle, but then you also like, you know, I don't ever want to diss anybody on the podcast, but like you hear people like V Shred, right? Where it's like, hey, you can eat all your sweets, you can do all this stuff, you don't have to fast, and you're going to be really healthy. And then, you have this information on the other side where, you know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
funny where we're going on that direction. But what were some of the challenges with fasting? Like what
Well,
were the challenges? Yeah.
I think the number one challenge that people struggle with is that they're not fasting clean. Now, fasting clean is a phrase that I came up with and somewhere around 2017. It was after my first book came out. Well, I didn't use the terminology in Delayed on Deny. But when people started coming into our different Facebook groups, we had, based on what I learned from reading the obesity code about keeping insulin response down, tapping into our fat stores for fuel, and all autophagy, which is our body's cellular housekeeping. We wanted all of those things to be going on. We want to burn fat. We want to keep our insulin low. We want to have increased autophagy. So to do that, we have to make sure we are not taking anything that's going to cause insulin response. We want to make sure we're not taking in like butter in our coffee, right? Because that's a source of fat. If you're drinking butter coffee, you're not going to be burning your own fat. And we also want to not take in any type of protein. So that helps us keep autophagy going strong. So like you're not drinking bone broth or something. So as we were thinking about how to communicate that with new members coming in the group, that's where the phrase "the clean fast" was born. And so the idea, immediately people got it. We're fasting clean. And, everybody thinks of the idea of eating clean. You're like keeping your eating to a certain way. But when you're fasting clean, the way that you fast matters. So, to keep insulin low, that's our fasting goal number one. We don't take any of those sweetened things, even if they're 0 calorie or chew gum or have breath mints or flavored water, flavored coffee. All of that is a no. Milk in your coffee, that would also be a no. To tap into our stored fat, we don't take in any source of fat like coconut oil in our coffee or bulletproof coffee. We avoid that. And then to keep autophagy going strong, we don't drink the bone broth. So the biggest mistake that people I hear from, they'll say, well, I tried fasting and it didn't work for me, or it was really, really hard and I was starving all the time. And I always say, what were you drinking? And they always tell the story of Monster drinks, or they were drinking their Diet Coke, or they heard a little bit of cream, didn't break a fast. And so I explained the clean fast to them. And I've literally heard it thousands of times now with all of my work in the intermittent fasting space. But there are so many people who say, well, I didn't really think that little splash of milk could make a difference. And I saw a YouTube video that said stevia was fine. And I thought it couldn't be true. But I decided to try it your way. And after I fasted clean, I couldn't believe what a difference it was. Like someone in my community, just like today, had been putting apple cider vinegar in her water because she thought that would be okay. And she'd been doing it for a long time. And then she stopped doing it after she heard me talk about the clean fast. And she said, I cannot believe the difference. I am no longer white knuckling it. I'm no longer starving. So for anybody who's listening, if you've tried fasting before and it was really, really hard, I bet you are not fasting clean. Fasting clean, you can have black coffee, not flavored. Don't add anything to it. Plain tea, plain water, plain sparkling water, no flavors. That's it. And it's, then when you open your eating window, you can have whatever you'd like, whatever makes you feel great.
Wow, that's so. I'm sitting here thinking about how I've thought, oh, if I chew gum, this is actually better than snacking. But in
It's
the end, it
not.
actually is not any better.
Yeah. Yeah. The
Wow.
World Health Organization just put out a statement. It might have been this week, but I just saw it this week. I don't know when they actually put it out. They're now saying, guess what? Artificial sweeteners are not helpful for people. They're actually linked to higher incidences of obesity, higher
Wow.
incidences of diabetes, higher incidences of, metabolic syndrome and all these problems. And it has to do with the fact that people think it's a freebie. So you're drinking these artificially sweetened things all day long, and your body is cranking out insulin because it thinks that calories are coming in, but they're not. And so that causes a lot of metabolic dysregulation and chronic high levels of insulin.
Wow. That's so crazy because so for me, everybody that knows me and that's going to listen to this, they know I have the biggest sweet tooth of my life. Like that's the hardest thing I have is I love sweets. So
Mhm.
anything that has any sweet to it. So what are some keys that you like? Were you into like? Did you like sweets? Did you have a bad sweet tooth when you
Oh, no, I
started?
was constantly drinking. Like I had something going in my mouth all day long before intermittent fasting. I was drinking lattes all the time. I put stevia in them, and so that was constant. I was nursing that constantly. I had flavor enhancers for my water. I chewed gum, so much gum. I would buy this kind of gum. It was xylitol, and it was supposed to be good for your teeth or something. And it was like natural. And I would get a canister with like 600 pieces of gum in it. And I ordered them that many at the time because I was constantly popping gum in my mouth. So there was probably never a 5 minute period of the day when I didn't have something flavored going into my mouth or chewing gum. And I was 210 pounds. And now I just fast clean until I open my window. We're recording this. I'm Eastern time. It's almost 5 p.m. I've had nothing all day except black coffee, plain water. I have a plain San Pellegrino right here. And I've had nothing. I brushed my teeth this morning. It's okay to brush your teeth. You don't have to worry about that because that's brief. But other than that, few seconds of brushing my teeth, I've had nothing flavored going into my mouth the whole day. So my insulin is low. And I've actually had my fasted insulin test done, and my insulin is below 5, which is ideal. And so I wish I had the data to know what it was back when I was constantly having something going into my mouth.
Yeah, that's so yeah, because that's one of my hardest things is I love the sweet. So like I drink black coffee, I only drink water. So that
Yeah.
part's easy for me. It's
Yeah.
like I feel like did you get headaches and stuff? Like what were the side effects of first starting? Like was there anything
Well,
bad to it?
you can definitely have side effects when you're starting. Um, when I actually, when I first started, I didn't know about fasting clean because the obesity code, remember, I lost my weight 2014 to 2015. The obesity code hadn't come out yet. I didn't know about the insulin response. And I was white knuckling it every single day, even though I was losing weight, had lost the weight. It was hard. And thank goodness I read the obesity code. But right after I read it, I started, realizing I can't put the stevia in my coffee anymore. I can't chew this gum anymore. I should stop putting the cinnamon in my coffee. I switched to the clean fast. Immediately it got easier. And I dropped a little bit more weight after that. But immediately I was no longer white knuckling it. But I will say what was interesting when I stopped putting stevia in my coffee, I had a withdrawal from the stevia. Like that shocked me. I wasn't
Wow.
expecting it. I felt like I had the flu. My husband always said he's a medicinal chemist. He has a PhD in medicinal chemistry. And he always told me, he said, that stevia probably is doing something in your body. I'm like, no, it's not. It's natural. It's good for you, blah, right? But the way that I felt when I stopped using it, it clearly was doing something in my brain more than just the cephalic phase insulin response to the sweetness. Like it was doing something chemically. And so, I like had it. I had like little jars of it and bottles of it in my purse, in my desk, in my car, and I would add it to everything. And now I no longer like the taste of it at all. Like I could have it in my eating window if I wanted to, and I don't. I can't stand it. But I feel like I was addicted to it.
That's crazy. It's funny how it does that because I'm such a nerd about things, so I started reading like about, black coffee and how
Right.
if you're putting stuff in your coffee, it really is getting rid of the actual maybe good things that coffee can
Hmm.
do. And so then I thought, well, I'm going to just force myself to go black coffee. And the other day I had some coffee and it had some sugar in it and it literally made me want to just like I didn't even want it. Like it was
Yeah.
like yuck. So it's it seems like it's probably more of a discipline thing, right? Like you
Well, it,
just
it
have to
is at
be
first. You just have to do it, right? When
yeah,
I made that switch, at first when I was like, well, I can't put stevia and cinnamon in my coffee anymore. That's delicious, but that's certainly not what you want while you're fasting. I was like, I'm just going to have to stop drinking coffee completely. There's no way I could drink black coffee. But I was like, well, I can try. And so,
yeah,
really, within a short period of time, my taste buds adjusted. At first, I just had, like Nike says, just do it. I had to just do it.
yeah,
But
yeah,
I genuinely believe if people like the smell of coffee, so anyone who likes the smell of coffee, you can train yourself to like the taste of black coffee as well. Our taste bud receptors turn over a few days, and it's like you have a whole new taste bud experience. Just, hold your nose, choke it down, and you'll get used to it. Now I actually prefer it that way. Like you said, I remember the first time I realized
yeah,
I preferred it black. It was shocking. I was on a flight going to California, and so my window was open, and I knew that it was going to be a while before dinner, and I was going to be up late because of the time difference. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm going to have a cup of coffee to keep me awake later tonight. And I'm going to put my windows open. I'm going to put cream and sugar in it. So I had the flight attendant bring me my coffee when I put cream and sugar in it. And I tasted it. And I'm like, no, this is not good. I was shocked because like I said, I
yeah,
used to love lattes. I was the pumpkin spice girl. I was gingerbread spice. I had all the lattes. And
yeah,
I was like, I'm sorry, could you just take this away and bring me some black coffee? And so from that moment, I knew I really was
yeah.
different.
That's so awesome. So I didn't even know we were going to go here, but this has been a big thing in the news lately. Has been the is it Ozempic or the
Ozempic. Yeah, all
yes,
those new drugs that are coming out. Yeah.
yes, that's been a big conversation. just like talking to someone who's been through it, it kind of seems like, in my opinion, from what I've read, it's kind of seems like a get skinny quick scheme, right?
Yeah.
Like, hey, let's you're going to pay this massive amount of money for these, pharmaceutical weight loss, which are really built for, from what I understand, diabetics, right? I mean, that's
Well,
what
that's how
the
they got started. They got started because they show promise. They bring down blood sugar levels, right? Which is what everyone wants to do. But they noticed that the people taking it, not only did their blood sugar numbers improve, but they lost weight significantly. And so then it started to gain interest as a weight loss drug. It's still so very new. We don't know the long-term effects, but based on the clinical studies that they've done with the drug, when people stop taking it, they regain the weight. And
right,
so the point of these drugs will be that you're going to take them forever. And we don't know what the long-term metabolic consequences are going to be. We do know
right,
there are side effects a lot of people have that are serious. It can lead to issues with your pancreas down the line. And look, if you had talked to 210-pound me that was desperate, I probably would have been, sign me up. I'll take those injections.
right,
I don't care. Back in the day, I took weight loss prescription medication that I got from a doctor because
right,
I was in that point where I thought, well, if a doctor is giving it to me, it has to be safe and good. But those weight loss medications that I took, the diet pills that I took from a doctor, I'm pretty sure that they trashed my metabolism. And
yeah,
that was prior to me weighing 210 pounds. It was when I stopped taking them that my weight really skyrocketed. So my
wow,
fear is that there are going to be people who, I mean, you can't get these weight loss new injections unless your BMI is a certain level. So when these
right,
people lose the weight and now that they no longer qualify, you're either going to have to pay a lot of money out of pocket or you're not
yeah,
going to be eligible for it anymore. So is this just a new yo-yo where you're yo-yoing
right,
up and down, up and down? And what are the long-term metabolic consequences? We just don't know. So anybody who's
right,
thinking about trying those drugs, from someone who longed for something that was going to be easy and painless, and the answer is not the drugs. The answer is intermittent fasting and the clean fast,
right,
because I have never felt better. When I was taking phentermine that the doctor prescribed and losing weight, I felt awful. I couldn't sleep. I felt like I was on speed. My brain didn't feel right. And it was terrible for me. And that's why
yeah,
I stopped taking them, because I knew I felt bad, but it sure was effective till I stopped. And so it taught me a lot about these quick fixes that really are, they're, you want to work with your body. And the thing about intermittent fasting is, it I think it's the way we're designed to live. If you look at any major religion, name any, they all incorporate fasting as part of
right,
their tradition. And the more and more doctors learn about intermittent fasting, they're not only doing it themselves, they're prescribing it for their patients. I've talked to a lot of
right,
researchers who research intermittent fasting. All of them do it after they research it. Every researcher who researches it starts doing it. It is such a healthy way to live. And none of them are like, I think I'll just take some drugs. No, we want to live in a way that our body is designed to live, work with the body the way that it works. We all know when we think about it that putting in foreign chemicals is not the way our body's designed to work.
right. Right. Yeah, that's been a big kick that I've kind of been on lately, is getting
Yeah.
into all of this, all these, hey, let's just take this pill
Yeah.
and let's get going, when this potentially could be better. Because I know for me, like when I take anything, and I thank goodness, knock on wood, I haven't had to take anything for a long time of as far as pharmaceutical stuff goes, but like you feel sluggish, like you
Yeah.
said, you
Oh,
feel
yeah.
sick, or you feel like it's just bogged down. So like when you started doing it, what was your energy levels like? Because that's something I hear everybody talk about, is that when they started fasting, the energy levels were amazing. Like
Well,
you
when they
you
first start, they might not be amazing.
you
They might be sluggish at first because the body's not fat adapted yet. So the whole adjustment period is a time where you're going to feel all sorts of ways. And so in my book, Fast Feast Repeat, I have the 28-day fast start, where I encourage people to think of the first 28 days. It's not your weight loss time. You might even gain a little weight. You're not fat adapted. You might feel foggy, the brain fog, because your brain is not well fueled while you're learning how to fast, while your body's physically learning how to do something new. And so
yeah,
once you are adapted, that's when you feel better mental clarity. Like I said, I haven't had anything today. It's just now 5 p.m. on the dot, and I'll open my window. I usually open a little earlier than this, but I don't like to do podcasts after I've eaten because I'm not quite as mentally sharp. But I mean, I eat every day. I love to eat. I'm not trying to lose weight, but I would be fine. I could just keep going. My body is fat adapted.
Wow.
I believe that we are designed to be metabolically flexible, and we're able to shift fuel sources as required. When I'm
Right.
eating, my body uses that fuel source. When I'm not, my body's able to use the fuel already on board. And so I've found a great balance. But I'm at maintenance. So the amount I'm putting in and the amount I'm using are balanced out. And that's why I stay the same weight. But I really think this is the way that we're supposed to be. We're not supposed to eat all the time. And you look at society. Now
Yeah.
that we have a Starbucks on every corner, and literally I challenge everyone to look around the next time you're in public. Everyone has something in their hand. And if it's
Right.
a bottle of something, it's probably not plain water, right? It's got something in it. If it's coffee, it's probably not black coffee. When
Right.
you order it, they're astonished when you order black coffee, right? They're like, "Do you
Oh
want
man.
room for cream?" And you're like, "No." And they're like, "Really?" I'm like, "Are you sure?"
Right. Right. Well,
But
they like,
we
yeah,
can
they, yeah,
we can see the obesity epidemic all around us, and we can also see that people are constantly snacking and
yeah.
drinking, and those things are connected.
Right. How has this is kind of a funny, I don't know if this is a question you get a lot, or how's like like, have you been healthier as far as like sickness
Oh
goes?
yeah.
Like, is your immune system better? Everything's better on that.
Absolutely. So much better. I no longer have seasonal allergies. I used to take allergy
Yeah.
medicine year round. And during the peak allergy season, I was taking both Benadryl and something else over the counter like crazy. I have not been to the doctor for illness since when did I have that flu? I think it was 2015. I was a
Wow.
teacher and I was always, getting ear infections and several times a year would have to take an antibiotic. But the last time, I think it was either February of either 2015 or 2016. See, I can't even remember now. I think it was 2015. And I was still pretty new to intermittent fasting. But I went to the doctor because I thought I had like a sinus infection or something because I didn't feel good. And it turned out it was the actual flu. And I was like, well, that's a surprise. I don't feel as bad as I normally feel if it's the flu. And I haven't had to go to the doctor for illness since then. So like I said, I'm
Wow.
53 years old. So that's pretty surprising.
That's awesome, though.
Yeah.
That's so great. I mean, it's crazy because I've been getting into all this, like I said before, all this. How do we become healthier?
Hmm.
How do we become better without having to do anything that's against what we would have done before, right? Like,
Yeah.
without having to do drugs and all this stuff. How do we become healthier? How do we become better? So that's fascinating. So, what about as far as happiness levels go, right? Like,
Oh,
I
I'm
feel like
so
we're in a
happy.
world, yeah, yeah, in a world of like, everybody, I feel like you pull up social media and everybody's either sad or they're, how many reels I pull up where they're just crying and like people are
Oh,
just sad right now, like it's,
yeah.
and maybe I'm on the wrong side of the algorithm. That makes me
Maybe. I
sound
don't
like,
know. They're showing me a lot of cats. I don't know.
yeah, but you know what I mean? I think
Yeah.
people are so depressed and frustrated about things. Have you noticed your happiness levels increase because of fasting?
Well, I think the key to it for me is it's released the mental angst and the space and the thoughts that I used to have to give all day long to eating. I mean, you may
Yeah,
not have the same experience as me, but for anyone who's been
right,
overweight, especially if you've dieted multiple times. We spend a great deal, or spent, I guess, in my past, a great deal of mental energy all throughout the day thinking about food and beverages. Should I have another snack? Is it time for lunch? Should I eat lunch now or should I wait? Well, now I'm hungry again. Should I have another snack now or should I wait? What should I eat? It was constant thoughts about should I, could I, what am I going to eat? But now that's turned off. It didn't even
right,
cross my mind. I knew we were having this interview. Didn't even cross my mind. Should I, could I eat? No. I just like
yeah,
there's no decision. So there's no decision fatigue that you're making constantly all day long. And there's a great deal of happiness that comes from not having to make that decision all the time. It's like why Steve Jobs always wore the same outfit. He didn't have to think
right.
about it. No decision fatigue. And he just
Wow.
put on the same clothes every day. For me, I just wait and then I'm not eating right now. And then I open my window. The biggest decision is it time for another cup of coffee or is it time to switch to water? Right. It's no big deal.
Right. Do you limit yourself to the amount of like how many cups of coffee you can have, or
No,
is it free game?
I mean, I love coffee, and I'm
Me too.
also, I talked about I had my genetics done, and
Yeah.
I am someone who is a fast caffeine metabolizer. Unfortunately, I'm a slow alcohol metabolizer, so I have to limit my alcohol, which explained a lot why some of my friends who can like drink me under the table and I'm like not okay and they're fine because they're fast alcohol metabolizers. I am not. Takes my body a while to clear it out. But as far as caffeine, I'm a fast caffeine metabolizer. So I also have a little touch of ADD, which being a teacher, I
Yeah.
understand how caffeine affects the ADHD brain. It actually calms us a little bit.
Yeah.
So I'm fine with caffeine. I usually stop drinking caffeine around noon, but I mean, I could have caffeine in the afternoon if I wanted to. I could have coffee, but I
Yeah.
usually just switch over. I'll brew a pot of
Yeah.
coffee in the morning and I stop when it's gone. Really, that's how it goes.
That's awesome. Yeah, because I love coffee.
I
So
love it too.
what
Yeah.
are what are some I always like listening to a podcast where there's some actionable steps. And I think one of the
Yeah,
actionable steps, and I'm not just saying this, would be to go read your book,
I think so.
Fast
Yeah.
Feast. Like I think that's a great way to start. But like what's an actionable step for someone who wants to start tomorrow? Do they dive in and do 16 hours? Do they dive in and do 12? Like what's the right way to go about it?
That's a great question, and it's going to depend on the person. And in Fast Feast Repeat, which really I agree with you, that's the first thing they should do. They should get a copy, and you're going to want the physical copy. You're going to want the paperback. If you're going to have to wait a little while to get it, go ahead and start listening on Audible. Go ahead and get the Kindle, whatever. Maybe you can get it through your library, but you're going to want to have your own physical copy because it's very comprehensive. It has like literally every frequently asked question anyone ever asked in the Facebook groups. It's in that book, so it's everything you need to know. But if you want to just start tomorrow, just start with the clean fast. Black coffee, plain tea. And when I say tea, I'm not talking about apple cinnamon delight. That is not tea. All those things on the tea aisle, like 1% of those things on the tea aisle are actually tea. Or I don't even know. Most of it's not tea. Herbal tea is not tea. When I say tea, I mean real tea. But stick to the clean fast. And when you get Fast Feast Repeat, go straight to the 28-day fast start chapter. And there are three different ways you can choose to start. And there's a little quiz you take. And, depending on whether you're someone who wants to ease in or whether you're in the middle or whether you're rip off the Band-Aid. Um, there are different weekly plans for each so that you can teach your body how to do this. I think about the adjustment period as like, kind of like a couch to 5K. If you want to run a 5K, you don't get up off the couch and run it day one. You have to build up to it. And that's what I want you to think about. You're building up your fasting muscle too. And, it might take you 28 days. Maybe your body will adapt faster if you're metabolically really healthy. But if you've been, obese for decades, you might not be adapted yet by the end of the first 28 days. That's where, your unique characteristics are going to come into play. But, be patient with your body and know that this is how we're designed. We are all born metabolically flexible. It's just through our modern lives that we lose that ability, but you can regain it.
That's awesome. So it's funny because it's all the same stuff, right? Like it's all just get it into a habit
Yeah.
and do
Oh,
it
it's a
every day
habit. Yep.
and
Have
you'll
you
be
read
good.
Atomic Habits?
I have.
Well,
It's the
James
best book.
Clear is an intermittent faster.
Oh,
Probably
really?
doesn't surprise you. Yeah, he does
Yeah,
intermittent
yeah,
fasting. And when I was reading Atomic Habits, I didn't know he was an intermittent faster. And the whole time I'm reading, I'm like, this just sounds like fasting, because it's building those
right.
habits. Like don't say I'm going to try intermittent fasting. Say I am an intermittent faster. It's like how you identify yourself. He talks about that in there. I mean, not about fasting, but like say whatever your habit is. Say I am, whatever it is. And so that
Right.
applies so well to what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all like just building this and that's what my argument was. And that's why I was super excited to have you on, especially during this whole rush of the medicines and the drugs that everybody's using to do this because it's like we don't like you said, maybe it will turn out and that's going to be a good solution. Maybe nothing will really go with but I just don't see it playing out that
Mm-mm.
way. Like, it's like the gastric bypasses, right? It's
Yeah.
those things where hey, you're going to do this, you're going to lose a lot of weight, but then eventually everybody you see that has one gets it back most likely or
People
gains some.
usually do. Most people gain it back. And there's some people in my intermittent fasting community who prior to intermittent fasting, they had gastric bypass surgery. And now, they went through the whole regain again. And now they're using intermittent fasting to control their weight and finally losing the weight again. But, intermittent fasting, I think bar none, I think all of them Some of them they don't regret that they did it, but they wish that they had known about intermittent fasting beforehand, and they probably
Hmm.
wouldn't have, if that makes sense. That was part of their journey.
Right.
Like Maya Angelou says, when you know better, you do better. But they didn't know there was a non-surgical
Right.
option for them, and now they wish they had found it prior to the surgery.
Right. And I know I'm kind of bouncing all over the place, but this kind of has come into my mind a little bit too. What is so you see these people like the other day I pulled up one and the guy was doing I think he did something like 48 hours or some kind of long fast, nothing, no food. Are we starting to see that intermittent fasting is like a better solution than going on these 7-day water
Yeah.
fasts where
You
it's
got to be careful. Got to be careful with fasting because you know how we are in our society. We're like, well, if a little bit of something is good, let's do a lot of it, right? And in
right,
Fast Feast Repeat, I have a chapter called Fasting Red Flags, and I call that the fasting Olympics. Right? We're not trying to be in the fasting Olympics here. And there's an interesting study. Now, keep in mind, we have great research on alternate day fasting, which is a very well researched approach where they have like fasting day, fasting day, eating day. But those people are just doing like 36 hours fasted. Have like you wake up, you don't eat at all, go to bed. The next day you have normal eating all day. So it's that's alternate day fasting. And that is very safe, shows great fat loss because you're losing great fat on the day that you're not eating. And then the next day is the metabolic boost day where you're eating all day, eating normally. They had the participants eat like 125% of their daily caloric needs. So they were slightly overeating, which is where the metabolic boost came in. But it balanced out and they lost weight. That's a very well researched type of fasting. It's safe, it's not going to hurt your metabolism. But we don't have research on longer fasts than that, where they really judge what's happening. Except there's one study that I'm aware of where they followed people on a 72-hour fast. Now, keep in mind, these people were not intermittent fasters. They were just normal people who they said, now you're going to do a 72-hour fast and we're going to check your biomarkers along the way. So in that 72-hour fast, they had their baseline metabolic rate, and they noticed that as the fast went on, their metabolic rate went up for a while, then it reached a peak, and then it started coming back down. And so by the time they got to hour 72, the metabolic rate was still slightly higher than it had been at baseline, but it was on a downward trajectory. So that shows us had they kept going, eventually, that curve is going to keep going down, down, down. Why is the metabolic rate going down? Well, it's because the body doesn't want you to die, and it will slow the metabolism to burn less fuel so that you will stay alive. And people don't keep that in mind. We know that alternate day fasting eating is protective of metabolism. But what we don't know is what is the spot where it starts to become detrimental to metabolism. And I have seen a lot of people over the years, back when we didn't really know anything in 2015 when I started my first group, I remember people coming in and they would be like, I'm going to fast till I lose all the weight. And they would fast for like 21 days or something. And they would lose a lot of weight, but then every single person who did these longer Olympic type fasts, every single one of them reported increase in binge behavior, quick weight regain. They felt like they couldn't control themselves. They're like, what's wrong with me? Why am I weak? Now I understand, after researching the Minnesota starvation experiment, I talk about this in Fast Feast Repeat, our bodies fight back because they don't want us to die. So if you have over fasted, then your body will send you a signal to binge that you cannot control. The urge to binge will just take over. And then that is when people start regaining the weight more quickly. And also the metabolisms are slowed. So all of that to be said, would I ever do a longer fast? Only if I were under medical supervision and I had a very specific reason, like I was going through chemotherapy because I had cancer and I wanted to medically support,
right,
my body healing.
right.
I would find a medical practitioner who understood it, and I would not be doing it for weight loss. I would not do anything beyond alternate daily fasting for weight loss, just because we do not know that upper threshold of when it's going to start having a problem for your metabolism. And I don't want to figure that out by accidentally fasting too much.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, and that's what's so cool about the intermittent fasting thing is you can still enjoy your life in a way,
Right.
right?
Oh,
Because
yeah.
like for me, it seems like going on a 72-hour fast would be maybe the most miserable thing in the world. Like, no matter, I mean, it just does seem like it would be miserable. And it seems like, so on the level of eating, like in your eating window, do you open, like, is everything fair game? Or are you still trying to think about, hey, we're going to eat healthy? Like, how does that, how do you go about that?
Well, it's interesting. Most people start off, and I actually suggest that people not change how they're eating at first, because you know how when you try to do too much at once, then you crash and burn. So when you
Yeah.
start intermittent fasting, day one, you're going to do the 28-day fast start. I want you to keep eating however you've been eating and just have an eating window every day. But most of us universally find that over time our tastes change. So if you look back at the me that was starting off from 2014 to 2015, the food that I wanted to eat back then is very different than the food that I like now. My body has changed a lot. A lot of that has to do with the health of your gut microbiome. My gut health, I have great gut health. And I eat lots and lots of veggies and beans and high fiber foods, and I feed my gut well, where our gut drives our cravings. So when I first started and I was eating the standard American diet, I had a very unhealthy gut. But gut rest, fasting, actually helps to promote a healthier gut. So over time, as my taste started to change, I started eating better food. I started to develop the gut that craved better food. And so the way I used to eat, I could never go back to that. It just doesn't seem appealing. But let it happen. It happens naturally for most of us that we start to gravitate towards better food choices.
Well, that's awesome. Well, that answered a lot of my questions, and I'm just so fascinated by all of this. And, the more and more research I do, and even talking to you, there's so many benefits for everybody. It was funny because my friend was here just before we started filming this, and she said, well, make sure that you ask her, can we do this? Because she's about the same age that I am.
Right.
And I said,
Women,
okay, yeah, yeah.
yes,
And
women can do it.
yeah, and she's like, yes, make sure everybody can do it. And I said, okay. And from what I've read in your books, in your research, I've listened to a few of your podcasts for preparation. Like, the amount of people getting results from this are just absolutely incredible. And it must feel great that you were on the first train of
It,
that.
it does
The
feel
first
great. And
wave.
let me address the whole idea of women. There's a lot of confusion out there because there's a lot of voices. All of a sudden, let me just say, within the past couple of years, people are starting to, write books and come out and
Right.
suggest that women have to do this differently. Like we're supposed to now, like, yes, women, you can do intermittent fasting, but you must know whether you're in your luteal phase or whatever. And I'm like, no, no, you do not. It is not that complicated. I mean, do you think women, you know, a, 1,000
Yeah.
years ago were like, I'm in
Yeah.
my luteal? No, people just ate.
Right.
Our bodies tell us what to do. I noticed there was always one day in my cycle prior to menopause where I was a little hungrier. I just ate more that day. It wasn't
Yeah.
complicated.
Yeah.
I'm just eating because my body told me I needed a little more food that
Right.
day. And so, it's really not that complicated. Now, what is bad for women is over restriction. So women should not over restrict through any paradigm. But no one told me that when I was taking the diet pills or eating
Right.
1,200 calories a day all day long. That was over restriction. Intermittent
Right.
fasting does not equate to over restriction. Now you could do it in an overly restrictive way, but if you'll notice, my book is not called Fast, Eat a Diet Meal, Repeat. It's called
Right.
Fast, Feast, Repeat, because in our eating window, we are not trying to over restrict. We are feeding and nourishing our bodies well. And so a well-crafted intermittent fasting approach is not over restriction. And everybody who's saying, oh, women, you got to be careful with fasting, they never told women to be careful with their 1,200 calorie diets, and they're also doing CrossFit. That's what's not good for us.
Right. That's so true. And
Yeah,
I'm happy you addressed that, because that was something, because you dive down the rabbit hole. I like
right.
dive down the rabbit holes. That's what I do. And you read all this stuff. Well, it's
Yeah.
good for these people. It's horrible for these people. It's good for this. It's bad for this. It's like so many diets out there. I feel like I need a doctorate's degree in physics to even figure out how to start. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
was
there's like,
being 210 pounds good for me? No. I mean, it wasn't.
right. Like, it feels like there's, you have to have this science degree to even get started on some of these diets. And it feels great that this one is, I mean, it's simple.
Yeah.
It's fast for 16 hours, 12 hours, whatever, you need to
Yeah.
do.
I'm
And
usually
then
around
eat
19. My eating window
19
is around
hours.
5 hours. So I don't count my fast. I only focus on my eating window. But mathematically, since a day has 24 hours,
You
if
know,
my eating window is 5 hours, that means my fast average is around 19. And it's no big deal. And it's so easy.
That's awesome.
My window's
That's so
open or it's closed. That's it.
that's so awesome. And so
Yeah.
you don't really even time that anymore. It's kind of
When I don't
just
need
you're
to
just
anymore. Yeah.
right, right.
I
You're
don't
just
have to
going
because some
for it.
days it's longer. Today it'll be a little shorter because I'm opening a little later. Maybe tomorrow it'll be a little longer because I'll be a little hungrier. I
Right.
just listen to my body.
That's
I know when I'm
fantastic.
hungry and I feel better if I wait. And
That's
that's
so
just how it
awesome.
goes. Yeah. It's what I do.
Well, yeah, that's awesome. Well, tell everybody where they can get your stuff, where they can listen to you, and we can wrap this up.
All right. Well, everybody, if you go to jenstevens.com, and that's spelled GIN, and Stevens is with a PH, jenstevens.com, everything is there. Links to my books, my podcasts, and also I have a community at jenstevens.com/community where I'm there every day and I will, you ask a question, I'll answer it. And it's just really a great space. It's off of Facebook. So we're no longer on Facebook. So you will not find me there. But I love the work that I'm doing. My podcast, Intermittent Fasting Stories. Um, I've been recording that since 2018. Over 320 episodes are now live in the world. So you can hear all the different stories.
Yeah,
Someone
that's
just like
awesome.
you out there has told their story.
That's awesome. Well, I think they definitely need to go check it out because it's a ton of fun to go listen to the stories. Like if you're someone that like just even
Mhm.
is curious about it, I think it's such a viable solution
Yeah.
to so many problems of
Yep.
just try it, right? Give it a shot at least. That's the
I think
best you
so. I really think everyone, unless you are, like I said, unless you are underage, right, or you're pregnant or breastfeeding, or if you
right.
have a history of eating disorders. Now, I'm not going to say no one who ever had a history of eating disorders can be successful with intermittent fasting because I've heard a lot of people who had perhaps binge eating disorder in the past and they found intermittent fasting has helped them a lot. But for anyone in those situations, you need to work with your counselor as you are implementing an intermittent fasting lifestyle. I would not try to do it by yourself if you've ever been under treatment for an eating disorder. Because fasting
That's
won't
awesome.
cause an eating disorder, but if you're someone who has had an eating disorder, you do need to proceed with a little caution.
Awesome. That is great. Well, Jen, thank you so much for coming on this. This is awesome. I think we started out the first show with a bang. So
Well, thank
I
you for
hope I
having me.
yeah. I hope maybe I'll start doing this. I really want to try it and then we can do this again sometime.
Awesome.
Okay. Thanks everybody, and we'll see you for the next episode.